Welcome to this EuroPD News debate, talking about data brought to us from Australia and New Zealand, and very relevant data for us here at EuroPD. And Dr. Johnson, I'll ask you, David, to talk to us about these very relevant data that you've brought to the table today.
Okay, well, we've tried to do a comprehensive multi-centre examination about examining outcomes and practices in peritonitis. And generally what we found over the last 3 years is that peritonitis rates, whilst they're comparable with a lot of other Western countries, 1 per 19.5 patient months in Australia and 1 per 16 patient months in New Zealand, there's extraordinary variability between each of the 66 centres with respect to outcomes and with practice patterns. And to give you some example, peritonitis rates range between those 66 centres from 1 per 2 patient months up to 1 per 48 patient months. Moreover, we find in significant proportions of units that there is deviation from evidence-based practice guidelines, and where there are those deviations, that's associated, not surprisingly, with significantly worse outcomes. To give you an example, 1 in 6 patients with documented MRSA peritonitis are not treated with any glycopeptides, vancomycin or teicoplanin, with the result being significantly increased risk of permanent hemodialysis transfer and death. Only 8% of patients receive antifungal prophylaxis. 47% of units don't engage in any sort of infection control evidence-based prophylactic regimen at all. 79% of documented cases of Pseudomonas peritonitis are only treated with 1 agent rather than the recommended 2 anti-Pseudomonal agents, again resulting in increased risk of permanent hemodialysis transfer and death and catheter removal. So, I mean, I could go on, but...
It's sad news anyway.
Yeah, I guess the important thing is that our peritonitis rates overall not too bad, could be much better, but what's extraordinary is the variability in the centre effect with respect to outcomes and practice patterns, and we've got a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, work to be done, so I hope we can solve part of the problem just asking opinions of people who know a lot about this. I'm going to start with Matthias. You're a microbiologist, you're new to PD. What's your first view on this rather dramatic data coming in?
I mean, for me, it's one of the most interesting things from this data set is the variability between different organisms, and so that we cannot just treat peritonitis as a whole. So we really have to look at individual organisms. We have to look more into the details of the individual species, the kind of disease they cause, antibiotic resistance. And then from my angle, one of the really important things is also how the immune response deals with different organisms, because the immune system distinguishes between different groups of organisms. And so we have to take all this into account for optimizing treatment.
Let's switch to you, Peter. From an industry perspective, we hear a lot about taking care of the patients. This is news about patients dying, which is different news. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think the interesting, major thing David said really is this variation between centres, this centre effect of where we know there's evidence for treatment in certain ways, and it's not incredible because it happens everywhere, I guess. But it's this persistence of not following practice every day, every time the patient comes with the same problem. And I guess from our perspective, it's thinking, what can we do to help that? When it comes to training of staff, when it comes to provision of perhaps rather simple tools which allow people to change their practice. This isn't some whizzy gadget here. This is just simple following evidence-based medicine.
Yeah. So it's about training.
It's about training and quality improvement. And I think the other great thing about this study is the rigorous way that it's examined clinical practice and outcomes, and also the honesty of people reporting what they actually do, which is the first step, I guess, in then the corrective part of the audit loop to then correct practice.
Dirk Vogelaar, you're a clinical microbiologist. You must have an opinion on this.
I'm not a clinical microbiologist. I'm an intensive care physician who turns to infectious diseases.
Okay.
So that's something completely different.
Okay,
that's even better.
So, Dirk Vogelaar, you must have an opinion on this.
I would join on your last remark. You talked about the honesty of reporting. I think that awareness of a problem is a key step in this process. If you don't know what the order of magnitude of your problem is, if you don't have a system of systematic of simple epidemiology in order to generate the data for your particular unit, for your particular problem, and that you can put these data into perspective, that you can benchmark them with international data for similar care settings, you will never apply, you will never see the importance. We have the same problem in catheter-related bloodstream infections, and actually when I train young nephrologists on this issue, I must say that in their core curriculum, they don't have the basic epidemiologic training, even to see that you need to approach this problem with the denominator, like patient months, like number of catheter days, and so on. They tend to express incidence of infection as percentage of their patients, which is complete nonsense. And if you don't have this basic epidemiologic training and apply this, and this is honestly turned into awareness, then you won't have the first step of being motivated to think in a bundle of care approach of this problem.
So obviously there's a need for more people with the basic microbiology training to get involved in
epidemiology training. It's
epidemiology
completely
training,
different from microbiology training itself.
Yeah. Would that satisfy you as a first step towards a solution, David?
Oh yes, I mean we've made a concerted effort over the last decade. I mean the data you're seeing now reflects our attempts to do this. We're doing we're now encouraging young trainees to train in biostatistics and epidemiology. We're involving half our advanced nephrology trainees do some sort of project in relation to the ANS data registry. And we're now trying to move towards audits. We're moving towards complete de-identification of data within the community, but at the moment the units we still are still anonymous. What we have agreed on is that the top 3 to 5 units in any particular category for any particular key performance indicator we're looking at will now be made, will be de-identified, so that at least units who are underperforming can identify which units are doing well and approach them to try to find out what they're doing differently that might impact on their own practice. So we are trying to do the, I mean, the first step is measuring it, as you said. You can't manage a problem unless you measure it. The next thing is to feed it back, which we've done. And now we're trying to implement changes in practice and then, again, audit to see whether we've made a difference.
Is there enough international consensus about how to deal with this?
I think I mean, there are evidence-based guidelines for adults and children, and the paediatric registry today, they've just presented their data. So there's enough, I guess there's enough evidence-based recommendation, but I think one of the things, and I think that's one of the great things about this session that we've just had today and other sessions within EuroPD, to concentrate on infection as a problem. Whereas it is the big reason why people leave PD. But you wouldn't think that from the programme of many meetings sometimes. We deal with other issues, but it's the practicalities of it's what kills our patients and what makes them lose PD. So to have the focus at this kind of meeting, it allows people to think it's okay to talk about this and then to think through what we do. I think maybe, again, I saw this from the paediatric registry, they've iterated their guidelines now. So they're going back with another algorithm treatment algorithm based on what they found in the first set of audits, which is kind of going backwards, which is good.
So that's another reason to attend EuroPD, you just told us. Okay, some final remarks on this, some conclusion? David?
I think there needs to be, I mean, I think that we have bared ourselves, but I think that's only because we're the first country to have seriously looked at this in a comprehensive way, at looking at all centres rather than just presenting, positive single centre data.
Yeah.
And I think that there needs to be more of this sort of activity globally. And like I said in my opening plenary, I think that there needs to be some sort of PD equivalent of DOPS to look at practice patterns, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but globally, to see how we can do better.
But it's a problem also of putting this into the training programs. The training programs focus on all these issues, technicalities and so on and so on. But there should be basic epidemiology in it as well. And every unit, everybody who goes into training in nephrology and doing nephrological practice must be aware that they need to have the epidemiological data on catheter-related bloodstream infections, on the rates of peritonitis and so on. And this should be multi-directional. It should also be included by the authorities into the accreditation systems. You need to have these data in as one of the quality indicators to have your center approved.
Good point. Good point, that. Yeah.
Okay, let's conclude with that. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Great.